Again, please.
My name is Mark Williams. I work for Monroe. Thank you for purchasing our products. We're here for you if you need anything. Notice I've got the cones out here.
Are we ready?
Right? Now you guys won't have cones later on. Just keep that in mind in case it starts to get windy. Remember these hinges. Get something. I use my tool bag a lot. I set my tool bag out there. I don't care about coming and hitting me.
Yeah.
I'm worried about it going out there and ripping this off against this. Okay, so there's a lot of material in this manual. This is your O&M manual. It has the index in front. The startup forms I've been filling out as I'm doing the startup is right here on this first couple of pages. I have this form also in digital format that I have online, so it'll stay with the station with this little file in our database. You have, when we went through production, we did some testing, and we actually ran this thing. We put water in it, we simulated the conditions you told us you were going to have out here. We ran it, we set it up. That's what this is. You got your drawings. So then you're going to have, the quotes, the startup information, modified parameters, and then you're going to have the wiring diagram, which is also right here. You're going to have the Escawa manual. This is a lot of information that you probably, if you are that kind of person that wants to read all that, you're welcome to, but if I were you, I would just call me. So anyway, you go to, it talks about all the components. You have a manual here for your pump, made by Franklin. You have another section here, which is your couplings and your fittings. You have another section here, which is your electrical components. Then you get to the last section here, how to maintain your pump station. Okay. So I've left the covers off to make this easier. But I just want you to know this information's back here. You're welcome to use this, use your own list, but this is meant as a guideline. So, voltage unloaded just means what's your voltage when the motor not running. You can come out here and do this in this disconnect out here. You can open this up and do this on the junction blocks right there. You can get this over here. That basically is telling us the condition, the situation of the power that you're feeding it, right? If you have a brownout or something, if you have an electrical problem. To be honest with you, more accurate, or more important is measurement is your voltage loaded. So when you put a load on something, if you see that your voltages are all even when you start out, and you put a load on it, now your voltages are very uneven, that tends to indicate a bad connection. You're going to want to measure your amperage loaded, so you want to put as much of a load on it as you can and then measure your amperage. If you're doing across the line pumps, you would do it individual lines. You have a drive, it's going to tell you the amperage on the display. The Megger readings, I don't imagine you guys are going to have a Megger, but a Megger is an insulation tester. If you're going to do that, you would put that on the output wires, and you would not want to run 1,000 volts on this while it's hooked up, so you'd want to disconnect it first. That's something that you probably are going to figure that you're not going to bother with out here. The drive has its own Megger measurement, insulation test measurement, and you don't really require that in this application. T-box connections. Where we make the connections to the motor inside this box, we call that a T-box, the terminal box. They're wire nuts. That is a common place for problems. I recommend that you pull the cover off, smell it with your nose, smell for burnt insulation, make sure the wire nuts are tight. I recommend you do that at least once a year. Check the gasket, make sure it's intact. Since this is in here, it's not that big a deal, but there's no oil to be changed here. Grease the bearings. There are 2 grease zerks. I noticed there are no relief ports on this motor. There is a possibility you're going to put a grease gun on this thing, and it's not going to, you won't be able to pump it. Unfortunately, the motor manufacturers quite often have switched to using sealed bearings nowadays, in which case they don't use the grease zerks anymore, and they don't tell us anywhere. So that's what I usually tell people. If you try to squirt it and it won't squirt, then you probably have sealed bearings. Don't worry about it. If it does take it, give it 2 or 3 pumps every 3 to 6 months, and don't over grease it. What you want to use type EM grease. EM stands for electric motor grease. There's a lot of greases out there that fit that qualification. You have to check with the grease manufacturer to find out if it's compatible with type EM grease, because that's what the motor manufacturer put in there. The pump, it says exercise the valves, open and close fully multiple times. What happens is as your water is running through there, it's building up calcium and building up mineral deposits on the sealing surfaces, and you want these valves to hold when you need them. So maybe we should, I wish I could show you. I wish we were on the other side right now. I would show you. Just make sure you close them and open them a couple of times to wipe that surface. I would do that at least once a year. You don't have flush lines. Inspect your mechanical seals. You're basically just looking to see if it's dripping any water from that section there at all. You don't have air bleed lines and stuffing box drain lines, but this would be a good time to check that bleed line I told you about on top for the air bleed port. Pump skid, clean and clear debris. I'm ashamed to tell you that I have done a PM on a pump station, walked away, and got a call from the customer after I was hours away and found out that the customer's complaining the station's not running. I went back to find out I forgot to put it back in auto. Seems like a silly thing, but we write it down just so you think about it before you leave. This is auto. That's off. That's hand. This is the speed control when it's in hand. The fans only operate when this has a run command. This will run for 20 seconds after we've turned it off. This one pretty much gets turned off as soon as the output goes off. So let me go back to my list here. Anytime you're doing any kind of work with electrical, you want to make sure that you flip the disconnect off. Don't get yourself electrocuted. A lot of places are going to require you to put a lockout tag out on there. What that does is prevent somebody else from walking in and flipping it on when you're in there. This station is 480, so be careful. So when you're in here though, after you've made sure there's no power, you check it with a voltmeter, you make sure there's no power here. As long as there's no power here, in this case, there's not going to be any power anyplace else. There is only one voltage source in this particular station. You want to pay close attention to the connections, anything with the bigger wires. So you'll want to go through all of these screw connections and these Allen bolt connections. You want to do these fuse holder connections. You'll want to do these connections. You'll want to do these bigger wire connections here coming into the drive, and these three going out of the drives. The little wires, I'm not too worried about. They don't have a lot of current on them, so they don't get that hot, and they don't cool off much different. So not having the temperature fluctuations, they don't get loose. They don't work their way loose. The control voltage is your transformer here. You're going to measure across this fuse right through that little hole with your meter, and you can go to ground, or if you can reach it, you can go inside there and get the ground in there, or you can just touch it right here. And there's also control voltage in the drive, which is 24 volts DC. That is actually not that critical for you either, because everything is pretty much self-contained in the drive, and the drive, if it has a problem, is going to let you know. The transducer, every once in a while that port's going to get closed. When I say every once in a while, you might have to do this. You're on potable water, you probably won't have to do that, but every 10 years that can actually get plugged. So if you have a situation where you're like you know you have no water pressure yet, it's showing you have water pressure, check and make sure the port's cleared. You're going to have them out once a year anyway, so that'd be a good time to check your port. We don't have level sensors here. We go to the VFD. Again, there's a fan here. If you have to replace it, you just pop this off. Takes no tools. Take the fan out, change it, but you want to make sure that that works. If that is not working, this drive will fault on overheat, over temp. And if you have to temporarily, you can actually put a fan on there underneath blowing through that, and that'll keep it running until you get another fan for it. If you wish to record user data, see how it says alarm and it says sleep? You can't really see much. If you flip that off, now you can get to this display here. The U4s in here are your maintenance things. If you actually want to keep track of how many hours you have on it, it has a log in there for what your usable life expectancy is for the drive. It works like the odometer in your car with the oil changes. It starts out that you have 100% of life left, and it just counts down gradually according to how many hours they think the capacitors are good for, the fan is good for, and everything else. If you wish to go through that, I recommend you call me, because that's another conversation in and of itself. The cooling, we're talking about these fans to keep the panel cool. This particular fan here is difficult to get out from inside the rain shield, so I recommend you just give this a little turn counterclockwise, take it off, push this out, take the foam out, and you can clean it. Put it back in the same way you took it out. Make sure it fits in the receptor. Push it back in at the top. It pivots at the bottom. Put this back up here. Line up the holes. Snap it back in place. This one's a little bit different, but a similar process. You rock it out of the top. This one has a paper filter. If you wish to stock these, you can go online and order yourself a box of these, or you can go get yourself a nylon cleanable material from Home Depot, cut it to size, and use that. These are basically to keep the critters and the dirt out of here. For the video, I'm going to leave that. I'll close that up as soon as we're done. We don't have a flow meter. We don't have a pressure relief valve. And you don't have GFCIs. So we're going to move on to the next section. Next section is winterization. This is going to give us our opportunity to go on this side. Remember, we're closing one set of doors so we can open the other set of doors. These valves have locks on them. That's this handle right here. So if you're going to close this, you pull this in, turn it to 90 degrees. And that's how you would isolate the station. When we talked about the maintenance on this thing and you want to wipe it, we're talking about this where it seals to close. That's what you're trying to wipe. And then put it back to open. We recommend you do all of the valves. Just work them back and forth a couple of times. It's kind of like the valves underneath your sink. It's really horrible when you have to replace that valve and it doesn't work anymore because you haven't exercised it. So for winterizing in this particular station, you guys have to drain all the lines out in your field. You usually have a compressor out here and you blow it out. There's various ways you can do it, but the things I need to bring to your attention is this is the check valve, this is the transducer, and these gauges and this pump are all the main things you have to be concerned about with freezing. So there's a plug on this pump. You'll want on the other side. You'll want to pull that to drain it. You'll want to crack this to let air in so the water can run out. Probably the first thing you want to do is pull this out here and put your air compressor on there. Blow out all your lines. If you blow it from here on your suction side and blow it all the way out, you're going to be clearing all of this and you're going to be okay. If otherwise, you're going to need to pull these clamps and drain the water out of that check valve and drain the water out of the pump so they don't break.
Do you have to remove the gauge and everything and the transducer there?
You need to bring that in because of the freezing problems with those.
Right, but before you blow it?
No, I would leave those in while you blow it.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, no, the transducer should be okay with the pressures you're going to run. You're not going to run that much air pressure. It'd be dangerous. Yeah, a couple 100 pounds is fine.
150?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, easily. Probably 350.
No, but not good.
You don't want to do that. So I said the transducer will be fine. You don't want to damage the gauges by putting that much pressure either on it either. This one here goes up to 200, so you'll be okay with that. So we talked about closing the discharge valve, blowing out the system downstream for the pump. Remove all the drain plugs from the piping in the pump. Do not reinstall the plugs. Set them aside someplace where you can find them again. Drain the suction. Turn off the water from incoming pressure. Disconnect all monitoring devices. Those are the gauges we just talked about. It talks about removing a 1/4-inch line from the transducer. Some stations we build, the transducer is not mounted directly to the pipe, and there's a 1/4-inch line that feeds to it. It doesn't pertain to this station. Make sure all the bolts on that check and the butterfly valves are loosened to let the water drain out. That's where they're talking about. You can just, these groove lock fittings, if you separate them, there's a rubber disc in there. You just slide it to the side and it lets all the water run out. So the next page on this thing talks about the auto-tune procedure. Anytime you replace the VFD or the motor, you're going to want to do an auto-tune. There's simple instructions here that explain it. It seems a little tricky at first. It's really not that bad. Call me if you have any questions. There's a checklist if you wish to use the checklist. It's basically the same thing we just talked about with the other things, but this one has boxes for it. So, yeah, so this is all in here. Everything you want to know is in here, and anything you don't want to know, it's probably not in here. I think that pretty much covers us.